Joining me in studio right now is political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe. Professor, good morning and welcome.
Good morning.
Yes, as you can see, the ANC has opened the week with two major incidents and affecting the organization, the spice tape case and the resignation of Mchunu, which we'll later get into. But looking at your crystal ball, do you see a good or bad omen for the ANC?
Well, I think we must accept that democracy is an experiment, and what people do, they make choices, and sometimes those choices work, sometimes they don't. And it is very difficult to make a prediction. But let's start first with the KZN matter. What we must accept is that when there are elections, those elections also expect almost have consequences where there might be changes in terms of leadership. So there is nothing amiss about a party going through elections and deciding to deploy members. So here we had Mchunu, who was a provincial chair, and he had lost elections. So what the ANC in KwaZulu-Natal said is that for the sake of continuity and unity, let us try this experiment and keep him in that position. But there comes a time when somebody who leads and does not have a strong political backing and is not in the political leadership, that it may create a sense of disquiet amongst other people. And what has happened in KZN is that they've reached a stage where they say, Senzo, as a premier, you have served us well, but we need to make changes that are necessary for the party, also to make sure that there's a streamlining. If you're not part of the political discussions that happen at the PC level and at the top 6 of that province, and you are also leading administratively, it may create a gap. So they are actually trying to close that gap. But the manner in which they had closed it is also to bring somebody who is also seasoned, experienced, and very mature in the Wilson Mchunu. So effectively, it's an ANC affair. But at the same time, what is important is how you handle it. And of course, there have been problems with the speculations that ran riot. But ANC is an open book, so it is sometimes very difficult to manage those. But what is most important is really that they need to stick more on policy, because we are affected more by policy that is implemented than a person. The person has little impact or has impact, but to a certain extent. What is most important is to make sure that the policies are not, leadership change does not lead to change in policy.
Professor, let me just interrupt you right there. I just want us to shift a little bit to the spy tapes, and you will later still talk about the scenario of Senzo Mchunu in KZN. President Zuma has now announced the appeal of the spy tape case, and now the ruling rather. We know that at this stage we cannot predict the outcome, but what does this move mean?
Well, what we must accept is that when you are accused, you have every right to exhaust all remedies available to you, and especially when you think the court may have erred. We must also accept another reality, that we've had instances where the court's decisions have been overturned by the higher courts. We've had instances where even the Supreme Court of Appeal, when it comes to a position where the Constitutional Court can find it wanting. So this is part of the checks and balances that we have in a democracy. But as an accused, you are not going to abandon the rights that are available to you. There is nothing illegal that the president is actually doing. He's simply exercising the rights that have been available to him and made possible by the Constitution. So he thinks, and his team thinks, that there are issues of law and there are issues of fact that the High Court may have overlooked or may have erred, and it is within his rights. So there are some of us who actually think that he must abandon his own rights, and he's not actually doing that.
Talking about rights, do you think that President Zuma will get a chance to answer to the charges in court anytime soon?
No, I mean, it depends on how the case unfolds. Remember, the president did appear before in a court of law. And we must also, there's a tendency for us to suffer from amnesia. The president did appear, and a number of times the courts did dismiss the charges against him, or actually they found that the prosecution authority was not in good standing in terms of how it was handling this matter. Actually, one of the judges did say this case has been limping from one crisis to the next. So we must, when we approach this, we must also be open to a possibility where the NPA might actually say, this, we have made so many mistakes that we do not think that he may get a fair trial.
All right, let's just continue with the Senzo story there. There has been a change of guard in KwaZulu-Natal. Willis Mchunu would be replacing Senzo Mchunu as Premier. The latter resigned last evening. Senzo will be deployed to the National Assembly. Mchunu's resignation follows mounting pressure from the ANC provincial structures, with reports of his possible resignation emerging last week. It was reported that provincial unit asked Mchunu to reshuffle his cabinet or step down. ANC KZN Provincial Chair Sihlezi Kalala says all processes have been followed, making a change in government and national leadership was taken into confidence.
It was also in the interest of the people of KwaZulu-Natal to have Comrade Senzo as the Premier. And that was defined by the ANC. And even today, it is the ANC that says Comrade Willis should lead from where Comrade Mchunu have taken us to. And it should not be like the ANC is about an individual. The ANC is a collective, it's a movement. The process was initiated by the Provincial Executive Committee as it happened previously. And it's not new, it had happened before. So it then proceeded to the national leadership. Because as the province, we are accountable to the membership of the organization, and we are accountable to the organization.
To discuss this matter further, I have political analyst Professor Sipho Seepe still in studio with me. Professor, again, let me welcome you and thank you. Now, in KZN, Senzo Mchunu has been removed as Premier, and some believe the act is linked to the fractions within the provincial structures. What does this mean for the ANC ahead of the municipal elections?
No, first of all, the ANC would have its political machinery on the ground, and that political machinery is responsible for making sure that the ANC either wins or lose elections. If it's a weak machinery, it will lose, irrespective of who is the Premier. But what is important also is to understand that in the democracy, there are contestation. So what we tend to do, we tend to put those as factions when people disagree about who should lead, what policy, what ideas, etc. But this is the nature of politics. The sooner we come to terms and understand that that is really the nature of democracy, contestation, and people will align themselves with views that are dominant or that speak more to themselves. And in this case, Senzo represented a particular perspective, and members decided to say, yes, we've agreed with you in the past, but now we do not agree with you. We want some leadership change. So let's accept that as a reality. But what will be more important for the ANC is that in as much as it is their own affair in terms of the management of transitions, they need to make sure that they take everybody on board. But what was important about what the chairperson of the province was also saying is that the individuals in the ANC are deployed by the ANC. So the ANC is a center. So it can recall, it can deploy, it can redeploy. There is nothing illegal, immoral, apolitical about that. What is most important is that, is it going to serve the ANC in the long run in terms of what its responsibility is to the people of KwaZulu-Natal.
Professor, what you just answered is, it's sounding, but would you acknowledge the fact that there are evident fractures or frictions within the ANC? I mean, is there has been talks about divisions within the ANC? How serious are these divisions at national level and maybe at provincial level? Again,
we must accept the most obvious. The ANC describes itself as a broad church. And the concept of the broad church means that there are different strands. You have the capitalists in the ANC, you have the socialists in the ANC, you have a traditionalist in the ANC, you have some who call themselves constitutionalists, you have some who are religious fanatics and all that. And effectively, some of these things reflect themselves as contradictions within the ANC. So, even in the best of times, you'll find that there'll be disagreements within the members of the ANC. But if you want people who are going to think alike all the time, then you don't need the broad church. So the ANC strength is in the fact that it has this broad group appeal, but at the same time, those are also a source of internal tensions. So that is what describes it. So we must accept that the ANC is what do you call it, a mess of contradictions. And it is that mess of contradictions that also makes it more appealing, because people begin to see themselves accommodated. So if I'm a capitalist, I can see that the organization accommodates me. But if I'm a communist, I'll also see that it accommodates me. But both capitalism and communism are continuously at loggerheads. So the ANC, the tensions are inherent. You cannot wish them away.
But is there any substance in the rumors that the pro-Zuma, is trying to take control of all the provinces so that it can win votes in order to make sure that the Deputy President Cyril Ramaphosa does not get a chance to be president?
Well, I mean, I don't know about that, but what I know is that politics is all about power. And those who have power and will try to use their power to influence the outcomes of the future. So it is possible that if the dominant grouping or faction within the ANC is the President Zuma's faction, obviously it will try to shape the ANC according to that dominance, that the dominant view that it holds. So that we must accept that. But there's this tendency for us to tend to think that you can have politics and not have power contestation, and not have people who are holding power not to influence things in their own direction. It doesn't happen anywhere in the world. Even here, it will happen that the people with better influence will use that influence.
Let's talk about this decision, because apparently the removal of Senzo Mchunu happened to take place while Ramaphosa, who we understand heads the deployment committee, is out of the country. Does this mean anything?
No, ANC is a party that is made of a number of members. Again, the problem is that we want to isolate individuals outside the organization, whereas these are, the ANC always talks about it being part of a collective. If people are unhappy within the organization as members of the leadership, they have a choice. If you're unhappy, you walk away. I have not seen Cyril beginning to suggest that he's unhappy with the manner in which the cases are handled. But it does not mean that they all are in agreement. They have to debate issues and they have to disagree. And it is only in the disagreement that they can actually improve on their own thinking. And I think we must celebrate the disagreements within the organization, because what it says is that perspectives that should have been on the table will be on the table.
Talking about choices, let's talk about the ultimatum that Senzo was given of either reshuffling his cabinet or stepping down.
Well, I mean,
how would you then put this within the context of what you just described as a ANC being an organization that celebrates diversity instead of you calling it friction rather, and ANC belonging to members more than one person, and choice? You were talking about choice, and how does that? Because when you're given an ultimatum, it seems as if there's no choice there. It's almost as if he was bullied to step down.
Well, I'll deal with what Senzo himself said, not the speculation. I mean, the speculation that we've heard is that he had to reshuffle the cabinet or step down. Yeah. But what he said is that I was deployed by the ANC, and the ANC did say my time is up, and I was expected to resign, and I'll be redeployed. So this is what he said. And he understands fully well that he is in that position because of the ANC. He's not in that position because he's smarter than all the people there. And this was what happened with President Mbeki, that the possibility of recall is always very good, because it helps, also it humbles leaders to understand that when you are put in that position, you are put there to serve. It is not a right. And what Senzo was doing is simply say, I was asked by my own organization, and I may not like the decision at a personal level, but given that I'm a deployee, I was willing to accept the ultimatum. The ultimatum must also come. You can't say to somebody that they resign and leave it open. You must say you must resign by a certain period.
Certain terms,
Otherwise, if you ask me and I'm in a position, say, Chief, I expect you to resign, I'll prolong it for as long as I can, especially if I benefit from being in that position. So the issue of putting a time on it is a very important one, and it comes out as an ultimatum because effectively, it's unfortunately the language that they use. He should actually be using to say, I was asked to step down this time. But when you put an ultimatum, you also make it almost like you're so forced, and you are also living reluctantly. But if you accept that you are deployed and you are there to serve, then you'll understand that people are saying your time is up, you need to move on.
Interesting times in politics indeed. Thank you very much for joining me in studio this morning. This is Professor Sipho Seepe, our political analyst.